What's going on with Ukraine's police reform? The new patrol police, created in 2015, a year and a half after the Maidan revolution, had become a darling of Ukrainian reformers. The leaders of the country bragged about it as the major success. Indeed, the Ukrainian population looked at the new police officers who replaced old corrupt militia with hope. And without naivety, they understood that changing the whole police apparatus in the country at war would be more difficult. Earlier this month, police responded to reports of a robbery in the Ukrainian city of Dnipro, but when they arrived at the scene of the crime, the suspect threw 2 grenades at them, injuring 5 officers. Here are photos from the scene. This incident, along with several recent high-profile murders and assassination attempts, has raised concerns about growing levels of crime and the police ability to respond it effectively. To discuss the challenges facing police reform, we are joined in the studio by law enforcement reform expert at the reanimation packages of the reform, Yevhen Krapivin. Good evening.
Good evening.
But earlier, Hromadske talked to the head of the new police, Serhiy Knyazyev, who had been selected for this post in an open competition a bit more than a half year ago. Knyazyev has served in the Ukraine law enforcement since the 90s.
There have been several incidents recently. Grenades exploded in Dnipro, the murder of Chechen-Ukrainian sniper Amina Okuyeva, a shooting in Kharkiv. It gives the impression that it's the 90s or criminal Chicago. Why didn't the police predict these crimes?
Well, the headlines indicate that the crime was committed. Objectively speaking, we're also occupied with crimes that haven't been committed, those that we predicted. But in the 90s, there was a different criminal situation in our country. We've had 39 murders where the instrument of the crime was a grenade, and this is in 10 months of this year, and there were 8 cases of anti-tank grenade launchers. This is in the peaceful regions of Ukraine.
Why is this happening?
Because there's a war going on. We opened the weapons arsenal. Our enemies did the same. Weapons spread into peaceful regions. We gathered the heads of the Dnipro, Kharkiv, Zaporizhzhia, Kherson, Donetsk, and Luhansk regions. Not just the heads of the regional police, but also the deputy heads of prevention, the crime prevention police, the patrol police, and even internal security were called. And they created a filter so that weapons didn't move from frontline territory to other regions. Unfortunately, this is a common situation in every country where there is a war.
How many illegal weapons are in people's possession?
In October alone, we registered more than 2,000 cases when law enforcement has seized illegal weapons. Since the beginning of the year, we have detected and registered more than 8,000 of these offenses.
Dnipro, there was a very tragic situation. The police came to the scene of a crime and were attacked with a grenade. How did the police protect themselves in such a situation?
This is a very unusual situation. We need to understand this because it isn't a question of the police's innocence or guilt. When a perpetrator throws a grenade into a locked room with a stairwell, everyone there is affected. We already had a similar situation in Chernihiv when the robber approached the cash register at a pawn shop with a machine gun and took money. We pursued him for a few days and he put up armed resistance. He threw a grenade at the assault team and some of the special unit employees were wounded. These officers are in critical condition. They probably won't be able to work in the police force anymore. This is a war in the state. Previously, crime was fairly weak, without grenades. But now, and where exactly do these grenades come from? And how can we make sure they don't fall into peaceful regions? This is a big prevention job.
On the murder of our colleague Pavlo Sheremet, why did you classify all the case files?
So that what the investigators did and didn't do wouldn't be a topic of discussion, because it doesn't bring beneficial information to the public. First of all, it undermines the investigation. The perpetrators of these crimes have not been detained.
How did our colleague's film help you?
We called this story Working on Our Mistakes. The film gave us an impetus to fix the mistakes we had made. And then they started accusing us of classifying everything. On the contrary, we maintain constant contact with all the participants in this project.
Достатньо ефективно з ними спілкуємося.
Чи зрушив з місця?
Has the investigation progressed since the film?
Чи зрушило з місця слідство після цього фільму?
Особи, які
Suspects have not been identified.
Наскільки нам відомо,
As far as we know, more than half of the officers in the Special Forces regiments worked in the police before. They worked during the Maidan Revolution. Some of them committed crimes. Some of them saw crimes being committed, but did not prevent them or testify about them at the prosecutor's office. Nevertheless, these people continue to work for the police. Why do you need them?
Потрібні поліції далі.
Чекайте, так я не 2 роки служу в поліції.
I've also been in the police for more than 2 years. Ukraine's constitution protects all citizens, and neatly saying, you're all bad because you're like this, is that democratic? Are these the values that we fought for? There is an investigative body that is investigating, and the National Police plays an active part in investigating these offenses. They report often on the progress of their achievements publicly enough. And what about the fact that there are dozens of police investigators working there, that there are dozens of operatives there? It's a simple fact. Conducting any investigation and ensuring first and foremost the security of the investigators conducting the investigation, this is what the Special Forces are doing.
Убезпечують слідчу групу.
Цей департамент, який розслідує...
This department of the Prosecutor General's office that is investigating the crimes on the Maidan repeatedly said that the police did not contribute to or poorly facilitated the investigation. Secondly, they claimed that 15,000 police officers testified to a few dozen people. Thirdly, we have a case with the employees of the Kharkiv police when they were suspected of crimes on the Maidan on February 18th. They were taken to the police. They beat journalists who were already in police status. Then the courts charged them for the mismanagement of the Kharkiv police, and they later fled to Russia. Do you really need such people?
Ну, такі люди потрібні в поліції?
Та ви самі відповіли.
You answered your question yourself. The police are not a monolith. This is an organization made up of 140,000 active employees, citizens of Ukraine. And we don't have a general opinion that everyone must think this way. There are managers at each level, and the managers make decisions in accordance with the rights that the managers have. No one can be singled out as a criminal without the proper procedures.
Злочинцям, поки це не буде досліджено і прийнято рішення суду щодо до всіх.
Пане Сергію, це правда. Але чи люди можуть себе...
This is true, but how do I as a citizen feel safe if a police officer who ought to defend me is committing a crime and being protected by the leadership of the police? As a citizen, in this case, I feel fear that I can't be safe.
Вони не захистять люди, розумієте?
The fear passes with time. At present, we have 2,000 Special Forces employees, and they perform an important common function. These aren't just words. These units have existed, they're still here, and they will continue to exist. In Kyiv, there are now 2 regiments of Special Forces, and it was my decision to create one more in order to provide protection and public security in the city of Kyiv.
Охорону публічної безпеки в місті Київ.
Скільки з цих...
So we have with us Yevhen, who is for a while, for a number of years, is monitoring the police and now the police reform. So following the interview with the head of the national police, what really are the most important things to understand? Like, to what extent it's successful? We understand there are some movements with the patrol police. Now there are some small steps with the reform of the criminal police. But really, what the people should understand?
First of all, Patrol Police, it's a real good case about the reforms at all, because all other initiatives, they just plans. What should be reformed to have better police, better policing? And what about criminal block? After 3 years of reform, we didn't do anything with it. The detectives, which announced by Sergei Knyazyev, is just a pilot project in some regions, but not the real unit which works now. First of all, what I have to say is that police reform is slow-going reform, and we really don't know the direction of this reform, because police doesn't have any policy, any strategy, any document in this sphere how to reformate them. Firstly, in 2014, we have strategy of reform of internal bodies. Then we have conception 100 days of quality of national police by Hatia Dekanaidze. It was her program. And unfortunately, these both documents do not finish, do not complete it even at the third part. And now there is again no document, and Minister of Internal Affairs, they announced a new strategy, like Strategy of Development of Minister of Internal Affairs 2020, but unfortunately it's a lot abstract document without some concrete, some certain measures. How do we, after 3 years of this reform, how can we evaluate the effectiveness of this reform? So it's a bit chaotic process. We going in some direct, but no one knows what is it direct. And about the elections, which will be in the next year, it will be a very big influensive matter to the police, unfortunately, because we don't have strategy.
I would like to bring the map. I would like my team to show the map of where we've got the new departments of the police in the country. So that, just to explain, there was a pretty big ambition. So these are the cities where the new patrol police stations had been created. In every single regional capital, also we have, for instance, we know that there are issues with smuggling. There is a border with EU in the western Ukraine. So we have in the smaller towns also the new police as well on the front line. These are not regional capitals like Mariupol, but as well towns like Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, Severodonetsk there. But this kind of this map looks nice, but really we have 140,000 policemen in the country. So how many of them are really this kind of reformed police? We know there was a process of attestation, accreditation. So let us know.
Yes, it's a very important thing that petrol police, the new petrol police, it's just 12,000. It's
less than 10%.
Yeah, less than 10%. And attestation, it's a mechanism which should dismiss all bad policemen, bad previous workers of militia. But really the result of attestation is just 8% of previous militiaries were dismissed by the result of the attestation. And half of them were returned by the court decision, because the legislation, the regulation of this attestation was has a lack. And every person who were dismissed can, without any evidences, any proofs, return to police, and our country pays them near 55 billion hryvnias because they didn't work this past year after attestation.
This is a pretty huge amount of money, less in dollars, though. Just generally understand, but is it really bad? You know, you really understand that, like when we talked a lot with a lot of foreign experts, you really understand you can't dismiss the whole police. That would be, even could be dangerous. So you need to have the people from the old guard to know it. For instance, that was exactly the case with the head of the national police. He's coming from the old guard, but he knows it compared to the previous head, Hatia Dekanaidze. Like using this opportunity just really give us an understanding, maybe we can somehow assess, or is it too early to assess the actions of particularly the man we've just heard?
Of course, we cannot fire everyone who works in the militia, but 8% or 20% is really a huge difference. And of course, in this situation, we cannot again make this attestation. In this case, all policemen who makes illegal actions, they should be fired. They should be punished by the other law enforcement bodies, and this is another problem about the accountability of the police, that when a policeman committed a crime or some disciplinary offense, which is not crime, it's a less offense, we do not have effective system to punish them, to have them to respond to their actions. Because now prosecutor's office, which also not reformed body, they investigate crimes committed by policemen, like tortures, illegal arrests, some bribery, or broken of the right to defense, when a police officer do not allow attorney to meet his client, etc. All these crimes prosecutor office investigates, but all the work to find evidences, to check the facts, is doing police itself. It's the Department of Internal Control, and usually it is the workers, the police officers who work in the cabinets, in the rooms near their colleagues who committed these crimes, and this is not effective, this is not independent body. And our hope is State Bureau of Investigation, which will be working in our country soon. We hope on this.
It's also what we need to say, that the biggest thing is as well the reform of the overall reform of the criminal justice and the law enforcement, because you need to have the reform prosecutor office and the reform courts, because we know that there are complaints even by the policemen that, if you speak to some of them, off the record, they would say that we are not always sure that even if we, stop somebody, that there would be fair justice in the end. And we had a number of cases about the policemen, even the new policemen coming away. So we know the cases that some of the people were more, let's say, disappointed in what they seen. Do you see the normal process? Like we know not a lot of not professionals joined this unit, so maybe it was just not for them.
Maybe again it's about some mechanisms to find dishonest person who makes illegal actions, and again it's a question for these bodies which have to control these actions. And you are right that police cannot reform itself in the sphere of criminal justice, because investigator, operative units, okay, but they just find evidences, they just prepare cases, criminal cases for the trial, and then prosecutor's office checks them, then judge made a decision, and its system has a lot of connections, and without reform the judicial system, without the reform of prosecutor's office, we cannot change the criminal police. And criminal police, it's really it's a very important part of the police. It's a core of the police, because preventing crimes, combating crimes, it is really the main function of the police.
And before we end, what we also understand that you can always complain here with the reason in Ukraine that there is a war going on. The Ministry of Interior has becoming extremely centralized, but there are reasons, because there is a National Guard under the Ministry of Interior. Yet, how you can describe the political will and also the role of the Minister of Interior, who is probably today, I'll be very blunt, is one of the, among the 5 most important people in the country?
Of course.
If not among the three,
yes.
yeah. If not the second, even
yes.
that.
And of course, the war in the East, the social and economic situations, a much amount of illegal weapon in our country, it all made a huge influence to the police work today. The crimes, the level of criminality really rises. It's not just stories from media, it's true. And what about the Avakov, the Minister of Internal Affairs? It was one step of the reform to depoliticize the position of head of the police. Why we create the separate separate law enforcement body, not Ministry of Internal Affairs, because we want to the European standards divide this function of Ministry of Internal Affairs as political person and head of the police as a manager. And really it's a good step, but now Ministry of Internal Affairs, he still has influence on the legal level. For example, head of the national police should approved his deputies, the chiefs of local police station with the Minister of Internal Affairs. And unfortunately, we have this disbalance because Avakov or any another Minister of Internal Affairs, he still has this influence, and again in the next year when it will be elections, we can meet a very bad situation when Minister Avakov will use police at the previous times in his own wills, in his own interest. It is a situation that can be changed by Parliament. It's just a few amendments to the law on the national police, and this situation will be solved. Unfortunately, the draft of law exists, but Parliament has more important things to do.
And besides, the Minister of Interior is running the second, one of the biggest faction in the parliament. Yes. Okay, thank you. It was Yevhen Krapivin, who is the expert of the reanimation packages of reform, in particular looking at the police reform.